I had a job once, a few years back, working the graveyard shift at a little corner store. You know the kind. Just a small convenience store, mostly snacks and lottery tickets, with a single cash register and a humming slushy machine that sounded like a sick engine. My shift was the quiet one, from midnight until 6 a.m. For the most part, it was just me in the silence, broken only by the occasional jingle of the door when a lone taxi driver or a kid with insomnia came in for a bag of chips. It was dull, it was monotonous, and it was exactly the kind of job that lets your mind wander. The first time I saw him, it was a little after 1 in the morning. I was restocking the beer fridge, and I happened to look up. He was just standing there, out on the sidewalk, not near the door, not even under the street light, just a few feet from the big plate glass window, looking straight inside. He wasn't moving, and I couldn't see his face clearly in the low light, but I could make out a strange, unyielding smile. I figured he was just some drunk guy who'd lost his bearings. I went back to stacking the beers. When I looked up again a couple of minutes later, he was gone. The next night, he was there again. Same time, same place. This time I paid more attention. He was wearing a beige trench coat that looked a couple of sizes too big, and a pair of worn-out, scuffed shoes. The smile was what really got to me. It didn't look happy. It looked pasted on, like someone had taken a pencil and drawn it on his face. He was completely motionless, just a silhouette against the hazy glow of the streetlights with that weird, permanent grin. I watched him for a solid 5 minutes. He never flinched, never swayed. Then, just like before, I looked away for a second, and when I looked back, he was gone. It turned into a routine. Every night, around the same time, he'd appear. He was my personal 1 a.m. alarm. I started to dread it. My coworker, an older guy named Frank, thought it was hilarious. "That's the Night Stalker, mate. He's just casing the joint. Nothing to worry about until he actually comes in." Frank had a point. The guy wasn't causing any trouble. He wasn't loitering by the door or trying to get my attention. He was just a silent fixture on the sidewalk. But the more I saw him, the more the little details started to grate on me. His clothes looked a little more tattered each night. A new smear of dirt here, a new fray in the fabric there. The smile, too, seemed to change. It started to look strained, almost painful, as if it was being held in place by sheer force of will. And his eyes, I swear to God, he never blinked. I tried it myself, staring at the security camera monitor until my eyes watered and I had to look away. He never did. The silence of the night started to feel heavier. The fluorescent hum and the whir of the refrigerator seemed to amplify my own breathing. I found myself checking the clock every 5 minutes as midnight approached, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. The man's presence started to feel personal. It wasn't about the store anymore. It was about me. He wasn't just staring at the building, he was staring at me. That fixed, unblinking gaze felt like a violation. I started to wonder where he went when he wasn't standing there. Was he sitting in a car down the street? Was he walking the neighborhoods? The uncertainty was what was killing me. I even started telling my girlfriend about it. She listened patiently for a few days, but eventually she just said, "Honey, maybe it's just a guy who lives around there. The night shift messes with your head." She meant well, but it only made me feel more isolated, like I was the only one who saw it. The fear started to bleed into my routine. I checked the security camera feeds on the small monitor behind the counter, but he was always just a blip, a grainy shape at the edge of the frame. I started double-checking the locks on the doors, even though they were on an auto-lock system. I'd feel the cold steel of the bolt, and for a second, I'd feel safe. But then I'd look up and see his silhouette in the glass, and I'd know that a lock was just a thing of metal and a little bit of false comfort. A few nights ago, it all came to a head. It was about 1:15 a.m., and I was on my last leg. I was so tired, I felt like my brain was rattling around in my skull. I had to go to the bathroom. I knew it was a stupid idea to leave the counter. The manager told us specifically not to leave the main sales floor unattended. But I couldn't hold it. I glanced outside. He was there, of course, still smiling that awful smile. I reasoned with myself, it's just a minute, he's outside. The door is locked from the outside. I couldn't have been in there for more than 60 seconds. I washed my hands, looked in the mirror, and my own face looked pale and tight. My eyes were bloodshot. I thought, this is what he's doing to me. When I came out, the little bell over the door didn't ring. It was silent. I came around the corner and stopped dead in my tracks. My stomach dropped. I could feel the blood drain from my face. He was there, standing right there, by the counter. He was on the other side of the register, but just a few feet away from me. The same man. The same beige trench coat, a little dirtier than I remembered, with a new dark stain on the lapel. The same scuffed shoes. He wasn't smiling anymore. His face was blank, an expressionless mask. He was just looking at me. His eyes weren't blinking. They were just fixed like two dark pieces of glass. My mouth went dry. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I opened my mouth to say something, but nothing came out. My brain was screaming, how did he get in? The door was locked. I heard no bell. The windows are sealed. My hands were shaking. I must have looked like a ghost. He just stood there for a long time, an eternity, and then he broke the silence. Hey, he said. His voice was completely normal. Not sinister, not threatening, just a regular guy talking. Can I get a pack of Marlboro Reds? He had a pack of gum in his hand, a little green pack. He put it on the counter. And this. I just stood there, my mind a complete blank. Was this a robbery? Was he going to pull out a knife? My body felt frozen. I mechanically reached for the pack of cigarettes. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely grab them. I scanned them, the little red laser beeping. The total flashed on the screen. He pulled out a $10 bill out of his pocket. It was crumpled and a little greasy. I took it, gave him his change, and he put it in his pocket without looking at it. He took the gum and the cigarettes, said thanks, and turned to walk out the door. The little bell over the door chimed as he went out. It sounded so loud. I watched him go, then I ran to the front door and locked it. I stood there leaning against the glass, panting. I looked at the security camera monitor. The camera feed just showed a blurry image of the front door area. Nothing. It had to have caught something. A flash of a person. Anything. But there was nothing. No sign he had ever come in. No bell. No figure. Just static. I didn't call the police. What would I have said? That a man was standing in front of my store, and then he wasn't, and then he was? They would have thought I was crazy. I just went back to the counter and sat down, my legs feeling like rubber. I spent the rest of the night just staring at the front door. Every time the wind rustled the leaves, I'd jump. Every time a car went by, my heart would pound. I was just waiting for him to show up again. But he never did. The next night, I was on edge. I kept looking for him. The next week, I was looking for him. It's been a few months now, and I still have the night shift. I still get that prickle on my neck every night around 1 a.m.
I still glance at the front window, half expecting to see that beige trench coat and that fixed smile. He never came back. I guess that's the thing. The terror wasn't in what he did. It was in the fact that he was so close to doing something, and then he just didn't. He broke a rule that night. He crossed a line, and now I'm waiting for the next one. The quiet isn't a relief anymore. It's an invitation. And I know, deep down, that when the time comes, that little bell over the door won't make a sound.
I took the job because I needed the money. Plain and simple. I'd sit at home after the kids were in bed, the bills piled on the counter, and I'd do the math in my head over and over. A couple $100 extra a week meant groceries for a month, maybe a new pair of shoes for my son, or putting something aside for the dentist. My day job was barely enough, so when I saw a help wanted sign for a night bartender at this old place downtown, I jumped at the chance. It was a perfect fit. They needed someone from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m., which meant I could get the kids to bed and then work while they were asleep. My new boss, an easygoing guy named Mark, spent a couple of weeks showing me the ropes. The place was called the Raven's Nest, and it was one of those classic, dimly lit pubs with dark wood, heavy tables, and a long, polished bar that gleamed under the hanging lamps. The air itself felt old, thick with the smell of stale beer and sawdust. When it was full, the place was loud, warm, and alive. But when the doors were locked and the lights were low, it was something else entirely. It felt like a tomb, a breathing thing holding its breath. My first solo shift, I was a nervous wreck. Mark had gone over the closing procedure 100 times, but I was terrified of forgetting something. After the last customers shuffled out, I locked the front door, and the whole place just died. The air got colder. The music stopped. All that was left was the low hum of the refrigerator behind the bar and the gentle creak of the ancient floorboards. I put my headphones in and started wiping down tables, trying to pretend I wasn't completely alone in a giant empty building. It's a different kind of quiet when you know you're the only living person in a space. You start noticing things you never heard before. A faint plink from the ice machine, a subtle, almost imperceptible groan from the old ventilation system. I just put it down to my imagination, the silence making a fool of me. I worked through my checklist, wiped down the bar, polished the glasses, cleaned the soda guns. I was wiping a table in the back corner when I heard a distinct thump from the other side of the room. It was sharp, like something heavy had dropped. My heart jumped. I froze, holding my breath. I listened, my mind racing. A rat? Maybe the building settling? I tried to shake it off, but my hands were shaking. I grabbed my phone. Mark had showed me how to access the security camera feed from the app. He'd said it was good for checking on deliveries. I just wanted to see if I could catch a mouse or something. I pulled up the feed and started swiping through the different angles. All the feeds looked normal. Empty tables, empty spar stools. The last camera was pointed at a dark storage closet in the back. I had to squint to see it properly. I saw a little bit of movement in the darkest part of the frame. A strange smudge that didn't look like static. I zoomed in, squinting, trying to make out what it was. It was a figure. A blurry, indistinct shape standing in the shadows of the storage closet. My blood ran cold. I started to panic. I looked from the screen back to the actual closet in the bar. Nothing. Just an open door and darkness. I held my breath and focused back on the screen. The figure was moving, slowly. It took a jerky, unnatural step out of the shadows. It was a woman. Her hair looked like mine. She was wearing a gray shirt, just like I was. My stomach twisted. It was me. A strange, distorted version of me. The figure on the screen was just standing there, staring towards the camera. Its movements were slow and stuttered, like a puppet on a string. I stared at the screen, and I swear, I saw the figure's head slowly tilt to the side, exactly how I was tilting my head. A wave of nausea hit me. I put my phone down, face down on the bar. I told myself it was a glitch. The old cameras were probably on the fritz. The building was old. These things happen. I went back to my checklist. I grabbed the mop and bucket and started mopping the floor, working my way from the back to the front. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. I kept thinking about my kids tucked into their beds at home. I was doing this for them. The thought was a lifeline. I had to be strong. I couldn't let my imagination get the best of me. I had to finish this shift. But the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. It was a physical sensation, like a cold hand on the back of my neck. Every reflective surface, the beer taps, the polished bar, the black mirror of the silent TV screens seemed to hold a brief, fleeting glimpse of something in my periphery. I couldn't resist. I stopped mopping and grabbed my phone. I flipped it over, my thumb hovering over the app. I told myself, just check it. Prove to yourself it's a glitch. I opened the feed. I scrolled back to the camera. The figure was gone from the storage closet. It was now standing right behind the bar, right where I had been. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked up. Nothing was there. I went to put my phone down and almost dropped it. The figure on the screen was raising its hand. My hand. It was holding something. A mop handle. The exact same mop handle I was holding. It was copying me. The movements were still slow and jerky, but they were a perfect, distorted mirror of my own. I watched the figure's hand tighten on the mop handle. Then it started to move it slowly, back and forth, just as I was about to. I slammed the phone on the counter and took a step back, my breath catching in my throat. I couldn't look at it again. I had to finish this shift. I had to. My kids' faces flashed through my mind, and I forced myself to move. I rushed through the last items on my list, a frantic, desperate race against the clock. I emptied the garbage, counted the cash, and went through the final lockup. I did it all without looking at my phone, without looking at the cameras. I just kept my eyes fixed on the door and tried to pretend I wasn't being watched by a version of myself. I could feel the presence, a suffocating feeling of being followed, but not in a physical way, more like a shadow attached to me that I couldn't see. Finally, at 3 a.m. on the dot, I was done. I unlocked the front door and burst out into the cool night air. I didn't stop to look back. I just ran to my car, fumbling with the keys, and I drove away as fast as I could. I didn't look back until I was a few blocks away. When I finally got home, the first thing I did was check the app again. The camera feed showed an empty bar. No figure, no me. Just an empty, quiet room. The next day, I talked to Mark and a couple of other bartenders about it. I tried to be casual, like it was a funny story. I told them about the strange noises and the figure on the camera. They just looked at each other and nodded. Oh yeah, that old place is weird. It does that sometimes. We've all seen some strange stuff on the cameras. No big deal. He laughed it off, and they went back to their drinks. I was the only one who had seen it mimic my movements, the strange, distorted reflection of myself. It never happened to me again, but now, every time I go in for my shift and the doors lock behind me, I feel the quiet. It's not a welcoming quiet anymore. It's a silence that feels like it's waiting for me to make the first move. And I know, deep down, that somewhere in the dark corners of that building, there's a part of me that's just waiting to be seen again. I still work that shift. The money is too important to stop. But I've learned to live with the quiet now. The fear isn't that something will break through the door, it's that it's already inside me.
Sometimes, when I'm getting ready for work, I'll look in the mirror, and for a split second, my reflection will feel a little out of sync, a fraction of a second slower than my movements. And I wonder if, somewhere in that old, empty bar, the other me is still standing in the dark, watching the cameras, waiting for our next shift to begin.
It was a cold, miserable night. The kind of night where the wind howls and rattles the windows like a desperate ghost trying to get in. I was stuck behind the front desk of the Wanderer's Rest, a hostel that had seen better days. The place was a relic of the 70s. All dark wood paneling, mismatched floral sofas, and a faint lingering smell of stale beer and old cigarettes. It was a graveyard shift, and I was the only one on duty. Just me, the glow of the computer screen, and the eerie quiet that settles in after midnight. I've been working there for about 6 months, and I thought I knew every quirk of the place, every creak and groan of the old building. But that night, something felt different. The silence wasn't just quiet. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket, the kind of silence that makes the hairs in the back of your neck stand up, like you're not as alone as you think you are. Around 2 a.m, I was halfway through a terrible science fiction novel when the bell on the desk chimed. I looked up, but the lobby was empty. My heart did a little jump. The doors were locked, and I hadn't heard a key in the lock. I shook it off, telling myself it was just the wind playing tricks. The old place was full of them. I went back to my book, but the uneasy feeling stayed with me, a little knot of dread in my stomach. A few minutes later, the booking system on my screen blinked, a small red notification icon appearing next to a name I didn't recognize. Adrian Finch. The system showed he'd checked in just a few hours ago, but I hadn't seen anyone. I double-checked the logbook, a dusty old ledger we still used as a backup. There it was, in my own sloppy handwriting from earlier that evening. Adrian Finch, room 207. The thing is, room 207 wasn't a room we used. It was a storage closet, a glorified junk room full of broken chairs and old mattresses. At least, that's what I'd always been told. No one ever booked it. No one had ever stayed in it. I stared at the entry, my mind racing. Had I made a mistake? Had I given someone the key to the wrong room? I picked up the phone and dialed the number on the reservation form. It rang once, twice, 3 times, and then went straight to voicemail. No name, no message, just a robotic voice telling me the mailbox was full. I tried calling again, but the same thing happened. A shiver ran down my spine. This was just weird. I tried to convince myself it was a glitch in the system, a late-night joke from a bored coworker. But the feeling in the pit of my stomach was a cold, hard stone. That's when the first call came in. The line crackled to life, and a man's voice, thick with a British accent, said, "Mate, what's going on up here? There's some serious noise coming from the room next door." I apologized and asked for his room number. "Room 206, he said, his voice laced with annoyance. "It sounds like someone's dragging a heavy dresser across the floor, or like someone's scratching at the walls." I told him I'd look into it, but my mind was already racing. Room 206, right next to 207. I told him it was probably just maintenance, a lie that felt thin even as it left my lips, but he didn't sound convinced. "It's not just the noise, mate. It's the whispers. I can't make out what they're saying, but it's unsettling." I tried to tell myself he was just tired, maybe a bit drunk, and that the old building was settling. But then the second call came in. A woman this time, her voice tight with fear. "Listen, I'm in room 208, and whatever's in that room between me and the other guy is making a god-awful racket. It sounds like someone's trying to claw their way through the floor." My hands were shaking. 2 separate people on opposite sides of the hallway were complaining about the same thing. Dragging noises, scratching, whispers. The same room. The one that was supposedly a storage closet. The one that had a reservation for a man I'd never seen. I had to go up. My boss, a perpetually grumpy woman named Brenda, had drilled it into us. You never leave the front desk unmanned. But she also told us to handle guest complaints immediately. I couldn't just sit there and pretend nothing was happening. I grabbed the master keycard, the one that could open any door in the place, and a small, heavy-duty flashlight. The beam cut a stark, white path through the dusty darkness of the hallway.
The second floor was dead quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like the world is holding its breath. I crept along the hallway, my footsteps echoing in the silence. I could hear my own heart thumping in my ears. I stopped outside room 207. The air felt colder here, a damp, clammy chill that seeped into my bones. I pressed my ear to the door, listening. Nothing. Just the faint hum of the building's ancient wiring. I knocked, lightly at first. "Hello? Mr. Finch?" No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. The silence was unnerving. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning unit from a few rooms down, the distant sirens of an ambulance outside. Everything felt normal, except for the heavy, suffocating presence of that door. I slid my master key into the slot, and the little green light blinked. I turned the handle. Locked. The keycard didn't work. It was locked from the inside. A cold wave of panic washed over me. How was that even possible? I'd given the man a keycard, not a physical key with the deadbolt. There was no deadbolt. My mind was reeling. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. I scrambled back down to the front desk, my mind a blur of confusion and terror. I knew I couldn't go back up there. Not alone. I was a receptionist, not a security guard. My boss would have a fit, but I had to call someone. I found a local locksmith's number on a worn-out business card tucked into a drawer. The man on the other end of the line, a guy named Frank, sounded half asleep. I explained the situation, trying to keep my voice from shaking. I made up some excuse about a malfunctioning lock, not wanting to sound like a lunatic. He grumbled, but agreed to come. He said he'd be there in about 30 minutes. The wait was unbearable. Every shadow seemed to stretch and writhe in the corners of the lobby. Every creak of the old building made me jump. When Frank arrived, a short, balding man with a kind face and tired eyes, I felt a wave of relief, so intense I almost started to cry. We went back up to the second floor together. Frank looked at the door, then at the lock. "This is a standard electronic lock, mate. Shouldn't be any trouble." He pulled out his tools, a small bag of picks and a portable lock-picking gun. He worked quickly and efficiently, his concentration absolute. The old door clicked, and the lock slid back with a satisfying thump. "There you go. Told you it wouldn't be a problem." He pushed the door open slowly, revealing the darkness within. I flicked on my flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom. The room was empty. No furniture, no bed, no suitcase. Just a thick layer of dust on the floor and a single rectangular stain on the wall where a picture frame used to hang. It was exactly as I remembered it. The storage closet. I stood there, my mind a blank slate. The man, the reservation, the phone calls, the noises, the locked door. It was all a fever dream, a hallucination. But Frank was standing right next to me, his flashlight beam sweeping across the empty room. He looked at me, a question in his eyes. I fumbled for an explanation, but I couldn't find the words. The air in the room was heavy, smelling of decay and old wood. I looked at the floor, and my flashlight beam landed on something I hadn't seen before. A small, crumpled piece of paper, half hidden under a pile of dust. I bent down and picked it up. It was a note. My handwriting. It was a single line scrawled on the back of a booking confirmation slip. Adrian Finch, 207. The night shift at the station is a world unto itself. The city goes quiet, the normal traffic dwindles to nothing, and the world is painted in the cold, synthetic glow of streetlights.
You sit in the ambulance bay, the air smelling of disinfectant and old stale coffee, the low hum of the oxygen pump a constant droning lullaby. It's a job built on stillness, punctuated by brief, frantic bursts of chaos. For me, it's a form of therapy, a long, quiet meditation on the thin line between order and emergency. My usual partner, a guy named Rick, always handled the radio and the paperwork. He was the voice of reason and routine, the guy who'd tell a bad joke to cut the tension. But that night, Rick was home with the flu, and I was alone in the rig, with the city lights on the horizon and the absolute black of the rural roads ahead. The isolation of being in that big metal box, the silence deafening, was a new kind of unnerving. I found myself thinking about my kids, about the sound of their laughter, a memory so clear and warm it felt impossibly far away. I had taken this job, these lonely hours, to give them a life I didn't have, to save up for their education, to make sure they'd never have to feel the quiet desperation of a dead end. That thought, that purpose, was what kept me sane through the long hours. The call came in just past 2 a.m. The dispatcher's voice was a little fuzzy with static, the kind you get when you're pushing the limits of the signal. The address was clear enough, though. Route 12, a few miles past the old county line, at the old Happy Trails gas station. The name itself felt like a joke. We almost never get calls out there. The area is all farmland and overgrown woods, a ghost town of old homesteads and forgotten roads. The dispatcher gave me the preliminary info. A man on the phone sounded panicked. His voice was a low, strained whisper that barely made it through the static. He kept repeating the words, "I'm lost, so lost." Then, mid-sentence, the call cut out completely. Just a high-pitched whine and then a flat click. I tried to hail the dispatcher again, but the radio went completely silent. A gradual fade to dead air, like a dying breath. I hit the console with the palm of my hand. Nothing. I tried every channel, flicked any switch. The digital display just showed no signal. No contact, no backup. Just me. It wasn't a choice, though. My professional training took over. A person was in trouble. I flipped on the siren, hit the gas, and headed out of the city. The drive was eerie. The asphalt turned to cracked pavement, and the streetlights gave way to an inky blackness that seemed to swallow my headlights. The world outside the ambulance was gone, replaced by a tunnel of light I was carving through the humid night air. The trees on either side of the road weren't just skeletal hands. They looked like they were reaching out, clutching at the sides of the rig as I passed. The only sounds were the tires on the worn-out road and the low, constant thrum of the engine. The farther I drove, the more my professional calm started to crack. A few minutes ago, this was just a job. Now it felt like I was driving into a void. My hands felt clammy on the steering wheel. I reached the coordinates the dispatcher had given me. There it was, the old gas station, or what was left of it. The sign was rusted, hanging by a single bolt that groaned in the non-existent wind. The pumps were derelict, a ghostly skeleton of what they once were, covered in peeling paint and a fine layer of what looked like dry rot. The air was thick, still, and smelled of rust and decay. The building itself was boarded up, the windows shattered. No car, no person, no sign of life anywhere. I got out of the ambulance, my flashlight cutting a beam through the darkness. The air was thick and still. I called out, "Hello, paramedic! Is anyone here?"
My voice disappeared into the void, absorbed by the stillness. I walked around the building, my boots crunching on gravel. Nothing. The place looked like it had been abandoned for 20 years. The hairs on my arms stood on end. Then I saw it. An old, cracked payphone booth on the side of the building. The phone itself was just a hanging plastic receiver with a frayed, cut cord. My stomach dropped. How could a call have come from here? I touched the phone, and it felt cold and dead, just like the whole place. This wasn't a joke or a prank. This was a violation of logic. I had to get out of there. I got back in the ambulance, my heart pounding in my ears. I tried the radio again. Still just that hollow static. I put the rig in reverse and got back on the road. The feeling of being watched was overwhelming. It was a suffocating pressure that had nothing to do with the stale air in the cab. I drove for what felt like 15 minutes. I kept my eyes on the road, trying to get back to familiar territory. I passed a few broken-down barns, a field of rusted, abandoned tractors. The landmarks seemed to stretch on forever, an endless loop of decay. My hands started to shake, a tremor I couldn't control. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe I was tired? Maybe I was hallucinating. The GPS screen on my dash began to flicker, showing impossible routes, roads that bent and folded in on themselves. I saw a distant light on the horizon, a familiar blue glow, a sign. I sighed, a wave of relief washing over me. But as I got closer, the relief turned to a cold, heart-stopping terror. The sign wasn't for a diner or a motel. It was the same rusted, broken sign from the gas station I had just left. The same one that said Happy Trails. I was back. I had been driving on a straight road. There were no turns, no other exits. I had driven forward and somehow ended up back where I started. The road was a circle, a trap. I was paralyzed. I stared at the gas station. But something was different. A figure. It wasn't there before, I was sure of it. A tall, slender figure was standing perfectly still beside one of the rusted gas pumps. It had its back to me. The stillness was unnatural, like a photograph. My hands were shaking, but a sick compulsion took over. I needed to see its face. I inched the ambulance forward, my high beams cutting through the darkness and illuminating the figure. And then it turned, slowly. It wasn't looking at me, but down at something in his hands. A face I knew. I had seen it 100 times on a local missing person poster from years ago. The face was pale and gaunt, the skin stretched tightly over the cheekbones. The eyes were sunken and hollowed out, reflecting nothing at all, not even the blinding light of my high beams. He was holding an old black rotary phone to his ear. The cord was cut, a frayed, rotting mess hanging from the receiver. He held the phone as if it were a fragile bird. His fingers curled around the plastic, and I saw that the skin on his knuckles was translucent. As I watched in a horror I can't even begin to describe, I saw his lips move. He was whispering, and this time I could hear him. A low, raspy whisper that sounded like it was coming from the static on my radio. "I'm still here. I'm so lost. Please, help me." He lowered the phone, and his eyes, those empty, dead eyes, met mine for the first time. There was no hatred in them, no malice, just an empty, eternal plea for help. A plea that had been going on for years, lost somewhere between a disconnected phone line and an ambulance that was destined to never arrive. I didn't wait. I put the ambulance in gear and floored it, the tires kicking up gravel. The siren wailed into the night, a desperate, broken sound. I didn't care anymore. I just drove.
I kept driving, not looking at my GPS, not looking at the road signs, just trying to get away from that place, from that face, from the impossible knowledge that the universe was broken. The feeling of the road stretching on, the trees blurring into a dark wall. I kept my foot on the pedal until the gas needle was almost at E. But every time I saw a light on the horizon, I'd get a sick feeling in my stomach because I knew I was just a few more miles away from seeing that rusted sign again. I never saw that figure again. But every night on my shift, as I drive past the city limits and the roads get dark, I feel a prickle on the back of my neck. And I can still hear that whispering voice on the phone, still calling for a help that can never be given. I've tried to look up the case of the missing man, but the police records are sealed and the old newspaper articles are gone. My professional calm is shattered. The world no longer feels sane. And I know, deep down,
I'm the one who's lost now, and he's the one waiting for me to come home. Some jobs just feel like they're designed for a specific kind of person. Like you have to be wired in a way that makes you okay with a lot of nothing. That was my gig. Night security at the old Apex Logistics warehouse. It was one of those places that swallowed sound. A massive concrete and steel tomb out in the middle of nowhere, just off the highway. I was one of 3 guys who rotated shifts, and the night shift was a special kind of lonely. My whole job was basically to sit in a small office with a wall of monitors, listen to the hum of the air vents, and drink lukewarm coffee. The first few weeks were a breeze. I'd bring a thermos, a half-eaten bag of chips, and some terrible podcasts to get me through the hours. The warehouse was always the same. Rows and rows of pallets stacked with brown cardboard boxes, each one identical to the next. It was a monotonous, soul-crushing kind of boredom. But it was a job, and the pay was decent. I'd use the downtime to call my brother, Liam, who was always up at that hour, or text my girlfriend, Sarah, who worked as a nurse and had just gotten off her shift. Those little connections kept me grounded, made the silence feel less heavy. It was around the 3rd month when things started to feel off. It was a Tuesday, I think. I was doing my first round of the night, walking the main aisles, just checking locks and making sure everything was where it was supposed to be. The air was cold, the kind of cold that bites at your lungs, but it was a relief from the stale heat of the office. As I passed the A section, I noticed a single box sitting on the floor, about 10 feet from a pallet. It looked like it had just been knocked off. I figured I'd get it on my way back. It was a small thing, but my mind registered it. In a place of such perfect order, a single misplaced box felt like a glaring error. About an hour later, I was back in the office watching the monitors. My eyes were starting to glaze over from the monotony. I glanced at the monitor for the A section, and something snagged my attention. The box I had seen earlier wasn't on the floor anymore. It was back on the pallet. I squinted, leaning in closer. My brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I remembered it wrong. I shrugged it off, assuming I'd imagined it. The human brain is a funny thing. It fills in the blanks, makes sense of nonsense. I was just tired. But then, a couple of nights later, it happened again. This time, I was looking at the C-section monitor. A whole pallet of boxes, one of those huge ones that takes a forklift to move, was slightly out of place. It was angled a few degrees off from the others. I know it sounds stupid, but it stood out. In a place where everything is perfectly aligned, anything that's even a little bit off is glaring. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I had to see it for myself. I grabbed my flashlight, the beam cutting a narrow, white path through the darkness, and walked out there. I put my hand on the cold shrink wrap. It was exactly as I had seen it on the screen. It was off-kilter. When I got back to the office, I looked at the monitor again. The pallet was perfectly straight. I rubbed my eyes, feeling a pressure behind them. Was I seeing things? I felt a wave of self-doubt. I called Liam. "Man, am I losing it?" I asked him. I told him about the boxes, trying to make it sound like a joke, like a funny story about a boring job. He laughed. "Dude, you're just bored. Go get some sleep." His voice was reassuring, grounded. It helped, for a little while. But the pattern continued. Small things at first. A single box on a different stack. A pallet moved forward a few inches. But then the changes started to get bigger. I started to notice patterns. The boxes and pallets would form lines or shapes, almost like they were being arranged. It was like a slow-motion game of Tetris, but with a sinister twist. It was never the same thing twice.
I'd go out and check, and it would be exactly as I saw it on the monitor. And when I got back to the office, it would be different. I started keeping a small notebook, jotting down the changes, trying to prove to myself that I wasn't going crazy. My whole shift became a game of cat and mouse with the warehouse. I'd walk the aisles, my flashlight cutting through the oppressive darkness, my breath fogging in the cold air. I'd stop and stare at the perfectly still rows of boxes, my mind racing,
What was I looking for? The answer was always the same. Nothing. There was never anyone. No sound, no movement. Just me and the silent, imposing walls of boxes. The warehouse started to feel like a living thing, a giant, hulking beast that was playing with its food. Me. One night, the fear got to me. It wasn't just paranoia anymore. It was a certainty. I was watching the monitors, and on the D-section screen, I saw something new. The boxes were arranged to form a letter. An A. Then another one shifted, and it was a C. Then an E. The letters appeared one after another, spelling out a word. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My mind was screaming at me to look away, to tell myself it was a prank, a joke, a malfunctioning camera. But I couldn't. I was glued to the screen. I had to see it for myself. I grabbed my flashlight and practically ran out there. The air was thick with a strange metallic smell. I rounded the corner into the D section, my heart pounding in my chest. I flicked on my flashlight, and the beam landed on the pallet I had been watching. It was exactly as I had seen it on the screen. The boxes were arranged to spell out ACE, the name of the company. It was a sick joke, a message. I felt a flash of anger, a surge of adrenaline. I wanted to find the person doing this, to confront them. But I knew there was no one. The place was locked down tight. No one could have gotten in. I walked back to my office, my mind in a haze of confusion and terror. I pulled up the security footage from the last hour. I scrubbed through the tape, looking at the D section. I was expecting to see a person, a prankster, a ghost. But I didn't see anything. The boxes moved on their own, slowly, deliberately. They slid across the floor, nudged each other, and arranged themselves into the letters. There was no one, just the boxes, moving with an eerie, silent purpose. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the mouse. I felt a wave of nausea. I watched the footage again, this time frame by frame. The boxes would just slide, like they were being pulled by an invisible hand. I shut off the monitor, my mind screaming. I didn't want to see it anymore. I felt a sense of dread, of being utterly and completely alone in a place that wasn't what it seemed. The warehouse wasn't just a building. It was a thing, a living, breathing entity. I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck, and I knew I couldn't stay there. I had to get out. I grabbed my keys and my phone, my heart racing. I had to call my boss, tell him what was happening. But what would I say? That the boxes were moving on their own? He'd think I was crazy. He'd fire me. But staying here felt like a death sentence. I started to walk to the main entrance, my footsteps echoing in the silence. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text message. I pulled it out, my hands still shaking. It was a picture of me. I was standing in the aisle, my back to the camera, my flashlight, a single beam of light in the darkness. The picture was taken from a security camera in the C section, but I was in the D section, and I had a clear view of the C section on my monitor. I felt a scream rising in my throat. My mind was a whirlwind of panic and confusion. How was that possible? The cameras were on a closed-circuit network. I was the only one with access. I felt a presence behind me. I didn't dare turn around. I just kept walking, my pace quickening. I made it to the main office, a small enclosed room near the front doors. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I looked at the monitors again, my eyes wide with terror. I looked at the monitor for the hallway leading to my office. There was a large box sitting right outside the door. It was a huge thing, bigger than any of the others. And on the side, scrawled in black marker, were the words, "Contents, your greatest fear." I sat there, frozen, for what felt like an eternity. The hum of the air vents, the drone of the highway, all of it just faded away.
all I could see was that box. I knew I couldn't leave, not with that thing sitting there. But I also knew I couldn't stay. The sun wouldn't be up for hours. I was trapped. I put my head in my hands and felt the cold, hard reality of my situation. I was a man in a building that was not what it seemed, a man being toyed with by something I couldn't explain. I don't know what was in that box, and I never will. I just sat there, waiting for the sun to come up, praying that whatever was outside the door would go away, and hoping that I would live to see another morning.
I was already counting the hours until sunrise when it started. It was just a flicker at first, a brief shimmer on monitor C7, like a ripple in a perfectly still pond. I work the graveyard shift at a corporate high-rise downtown, a job so boring it's practically a form of meditation. From midnight to 6 a.m., it's just me, the low hum of the servers, and a wall of security monitors. The air in the building is sterile and cold, smelling faintly of cleaning supplies. And every floor is a mirror image of the last, endless corridors of desks and cubicles, all sitting in perfect, empty silence. This place is a ghost ship after 5. Just silent desks, darkened screens, and an eerie sense of waiting. I took this job for the quiet. It pays the bills, keeps me out of trouble, and it lets me put a little money away for my daughter's future, a future where she won't have to work these lonely hours. I have a small photo of her on my desk, laughing, her smile the one bright spot in a world of endless gray cubicles. That thought, that single, simple purpose, was what kept me sane. The first real oddity came about an hour after the flicker. I was scanning through the feeds, watching the motion sensors on floor 14, an office that's supposed to be empty. No motion. But on camera C14, I saw a chair, a black office chair with wheels, slowly move a couple of inches from a desk. It wasn't a quick jolt. It was a deliberate, almost graceful shift, as if someone had just stood up. I rewound the footage, replayed it. The chair definitely moved. There was no one in the room, no open window, no draft. I logged it, noting it as a possible sensor malfunction, and moved on. My mind was already filing it away under weird stuff that happens on the night shift. It was the kind of thing you brush off, probably just the building settling, a tremor that didn't register on the sensors. That's what I told myself, anyway. About half an hour later, I was doing my patrol walk on floor 22. The floor was dark, the emergency lights casting a faint pale glow on the endless rows of cubicles. Everything seemed normal. But as I was coming back down in the elevator, I looked at the security feed on the small monitor inside the car. It was showing a live feed of the very hallway I had just walked through. And in that feed, in the doorway to a conference room, was a faint shadow. It was tall and thin, but it didn't look like a person's shadow. It was a sharp, angular patch of absolute darkness that seemed to absorb the light around it, a negative space where nothing should have been. It was gone in a millisecond, a brief, impossible smudge. The elevator doors opened on the ground floor, and the feeling of being watched was suddenly overwhelming. I got back to the security room, my heart doing a slow, heavy thump against my ribs. I stared at the monitors, my eyes now scanning for anything, not just movement, but anything that was off. I tried to tell myself it was just a technical glitch, a side effect of a worn-out system. The building was a living thing, and it was telling me something was wrong. That's when it happened. I was watching the feed from the main lobby, just the empty front desk and the revolving doors. I glanced over at the feed from the employee lounge on the 3rd floor. And then I saw it. A clear, high-definition shot of me. I was sitting in my chair in the security room. I saw myself looking at the monitors, and then I saw myself turn my head slowly as if glancing at the clock on the wall. But I hadn't moved. I was still looking at the lounge feed, my gaze fixed on a coffee machine. My brain struggled to process it. The feed was live. It had to be. I looked down at my hands, at the coffee cup I was holding. The me on the screen was holding a different cup, a white ceramic mug, and there was a small brown stain on the rim. My own mug was on the desk, clean and empty. This was impossible. Then I realized something much worse. The timestamp on the camera feed was off. It was 2 minutes ahead of my system clock. I watched myself on the screen get up, walk over to the small kitchen, and pour myself another cup of coffee. I looked at my clock, and a wave of nausea hit me. I watched my own future playing out in real time on a monitor. My hands started to shake, a frantic, uncontrollable tremor. I was trapped. The terror wasn't in a ghost or a monster. It was in the sudden, horrifying loss of control. I looked at the monitors and saw myself, on camera 12, standing in the middle of a hallway. I knew that I was about to stand up, grab my flashlight, and go there. I saw myself on camera 8, trying to use my keycard to open the main loading dock door. I saw myself on camera 2, standing in front of the server room, my face a mask of panicked determination. I was a puppet, and my own security cameras were showing me the strings. I was no longer an observer. I was the subject, trapped in a pre-recorded loop, unable to escape a future that had already been recorded. I saw myself try to smash the monitors, try to shut off the feed, but I knew it was useless. It was already a done deal. I saw myself on the screen, running for the main doors, my face contorted in a scream. I looked at the wall of screens, and they were all showing my movements from a few seconds in the future. I saw myself standing in the corner of the security room, my hands over my mouth, my eyes wide with the terror that I was feeling right now. I looked at a feed showing the main lobby, and there I was, on the screen, standing motionless by the front door, staring directly into the camera. The real me was in the security room, but the person on the screen was looking right at me, a still image of my own despair. The image didn't move. It was frozen in a moment of absolute, complete hopelessness. I looked away, my breath catching in my throat because I knew. I was looking into a mirror of my own future, and I was already a ghost in the machine.